Welcome back to Unit 9. Today we're going to be talking about analyzing histograms. We're going to do a couple examples together, and you're going to work together to do some practice problems. So let's take a look right here at example A. Example A says this histogram displays data about student grades in a math class. Use the graph to respond to the following questions. So we've got a graph there, talks about grades, number of students, and we need to use that information to answer these three questions. So the first question says, how many students are represented in this graph? So taking a look at my graph, I need to figure out how many students there are total. So some of our common misconceptions are we'll look right here and say, hey, it goes up to 7, so there must be 7 students. But that doesn't make much sense. There's not a whole lot of classes that have 7 students in them. So what we actually need to do is take a look at each one of our bar graphs and figure out how many students we have in each of those sections to determine how many we have total. So we have 3 students here, we have 4 students here, we have 6 students here, we have 5 students with a grade of 80 to 89, and then we have 2 students with a grade of 90 to 99. So now we're going to just add those all together to figure out how many students are represented in our graph. So we're going to take our 3 plus our 4 plus our 6 plus our 5 plus our 2 to figure out the total number of students that we have. 6 plus 4 is 10, 10 plus 5 is 15, 15 plus 3 is going to give us 18, 18 plus 2 is going to give us 20. So there are 20 students in this graph, and that answers that first question. The second question says, how many students have a grade lower than 70% in this math class? So it sounds like right there, we're going to have to be using a proportion. But luckily for us, we know how to use proportions, so we can do that. We need to figure out how many students have a grade of lower than 70%. So we have to look at which columns are lower than 70%. So this column, 50 to 59, lower than 70%. We're good so far. This column, below 70%, 60 to 69. Taking a look at our next column, says 70, so that column is not going to be added here since it has grades that are either 70 or above. So now that we've got those two columns, we need to figure out how many students are there in each column. So 3 plus 4 is going to give us 7. And taking a look back at our question, it says how many students have a grade lower than 70%. So good news, we don't actually need a proportion here because we only need this number of students. So since I can take my 3 students from the first column plus my 4 students from the second column, that's going to give me 7 students total. So that answers that question. Now looking at letter C, it says what percentage of students have a score between 70% and 89%. Here's where we might need our proportion, but let's find out. We need to figure out what number of students there are first between a 70 and an 89. So going over our columns, between 70 and 89, the first column there, 70 to 79, looks good. And then 80 to 89, that second column there looks good. The columns that we just figured out, the 50 to 59 and the 60 to 69, they don't qualify. And the column with the 90 to 99, they don't qualify because they're too far above. So now we need to figure out how many students are in those two columns together. So 6 plus 5 is going to give us 11 students total out of the 20 students that we know are in this class. So 11 out of 20. Then we need to figure out what percentage that is. So we're going to need to use our proportion like we talked about. That's going to be out of 100. All percentages that we try and find are. So then we don't know what percentage that is. That's going to be our x. And now we've got ourselves a proportion. We know news there because we know how to solve proportions. So we're going to cross multiply. 20 times x is going to give me 20x. 11 times 100 is going to give me 1,100. Then I'm going to draw my wall down from my equal sign. I'm going to divide both sides by 20 because we're going to do the inverse operation. 20 divided by 20 is 1, or 1x. And 1100 divided by 20 is 55. And we're going to write that as 55% since it asks us what percentage. And that answers that question. So see, we took our one graph and we're able to answer many things about it using things that we learned. So we knew that we had to add things up. We needed to figure out which columns had certain amounts in them. And then we needed to use a proportion on our last problem, which we knew how to do. So we had to take a look at our graph and manipulate it around to figure out each thing. Now let's take a look at our second example. So example B says, circle the histogram that best represents the stem and leaf plot on the right. So the first thing that we have to know about this problem is what a stem and leaf plot represents, because that will better help us figure out which histogram is correct. So It's important to remember when it comes to a stem and leaf plot that the stem equals the tens place and the leaf equals the ones place. So for our first number there as an example, the leaf is a 1 and the stem is a 7, so our number is 71. Our second number has a leaf of 3 and the stem is 7, so 73. So now that we know that information, we can use that to better figure out our histograms. So we're going to have to go through each histogram and determine if it meets all of the qualifications. So our first histogram says 70 to 74 and it has 2 numbers in that column. So now we need to compare our stem and leaf plot to that histogram. So do we have 2 numbers that are between 70 and 74? Yes, we do. So that histogram is still in the running. Now we need to take a look at letter B. And in letter B, we've got 5 numbers between 70 and 74, but that is not the case in our stem and leaf plot. Notice that here it says it goes up to 5, but we've only got 2 numbers in our stem and leaf plot, so answer B is already been eliminated. Now let's take a look at example C, and again, it has 70 to 74, and it says that it has 2, and the good news for us is that we also have 2, so that answer is still in the running. Then we can take a look at our last histogram there, and it has 5 numbers again between 70 and 74, but that is not the case for us, so we know that example D has already been eliminated. So the good news is we're already down to the 2 answers after the first one. So the next column is 75 to 79, so we've got 1, 2, 3 numbers between 70 and 79, 75 and 79, and the 2 left have a 3, so the first one works out. And the second one has a 3, so that one also works out. So now we need to keep going because both of those had the same thing. So now between 80 and 84, we need to figure out how many numbers we have. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, because remember the stem is going to stand for the 80, and the leaf is going to stand for those 82, 83, 83, and 84. So now we have 4 numbers through there, and our first graph there says that it has 6. So since we only have 4, we know that that one is not correct. And since our stem and leaf plot there down at the bottom says 4, and we have 4 examples, we know that this is the only possible answer that could be correct. So notice you're going to just keep going along until you eliminate down to 1 histogram that matches your table. Now this brings us to the end of this video, and you have quite a bit of practice problems to do. You might want to find somebody to help you do them so that you're not trying to do them on your own. Can you do them on your own? Of course, but it's a lot easier if you have more people helping you. Now, the difference between somebody helping you and copying is that you have to contribute something to the work as well. You can't just take somebody else's answer, or that doesn't help you learn. That brings us to the end of this video. So if you like this video, go ahead and throw us a thumbs up. If you love this video, go ahead and throw us a sub, and we will catch you in the next one.